Manuel María de los Dolores Clemente Ramón do Sagrado Corazón de Jesús Falla y Mateo was born on March 23, 1876 in the Andalusian city of Cádiz. His father José was a wealthy merchant originally from Valencia, while his mother Maria was a pianist from a wealthy industrial family originally from Catalonia. He also had 4 siblings. Manuel had a weak complexion throughout his entire life, which caused him to become obsessed with cleanliness. His mother began giving him music theory lessons, and a family nurse would teach him lullabies and popular songs. Manuel then began studying more formally with Eloisa Galluzzo, Alejandro Ordera, and Enrique Broca. Around this time, he began attending evening chamber music performances at the house of painter Salvador Viniegra. Viniegra was a friend of the Fallas, granting Manuel access to his large musical library. In addition, Manuel would attend numerous other musical events throughout Cádiz and discover the music of Mozart, Beethoven, Grieg, Gounod, and Vincenzo Bellini. His first public performance was given when he was either 9 or 11 years old, where he played Haydn's The 7 Last Words of Christ on the Cross with his mother. Around age 12, Manuel developed an interest in literature and journalism, founding and directing 2 magazines. He also began composing around this time, writing a 4-act opera in 1887. However, his Gavotte et Musette, written in 1892, was designated as his first opus. By age 17, Manuel had committed himself to music. Falla began regularly traveling to the Spanish capital of Madrid in 1896 and eventually settled there by the end of the year. He began attending the Real Conservatorio de Música y Declamación, studying piano under José Trago. In 1897, Falla wrote Melodia for cello and piano, which he dedicated to Viniegra. 2 years later, he would finish his studies at the conservatory, passing with high grades and receiving its first piano prize. Falla would frequently travel back to Cádiz to give recitals, performing works by Chopin, Schumann, Grieg, as well as his own. Due to financial problems, Falla's family would move in with him in Madrid, with Manuel having to give piano lessons to support them. He had only been writing for piano and chamber ensembles up to this point. This all changed in 1900 when he wrote his first zarzuela, La Juana y la Petra. A year later, Falla met composer and musicologist Felipe Pedrell. Pedrell would become a major influence on Falla, helping him develop an interest in flamenco. Falla would later claim he owed his, quote, clearest and firmest orientation to my work to Pedrell. Falla would also meet and be supported by composers Joaquín Turina and Federico Chueca. Some other works written around this time include Los Amores de la Inés and Allegro de Concierto. Falla would then collaborate with composer Amadeo Vives y Roche on multiple zarzuelas, as well as playwright Carlos Fernández Shaw on his opera La Vida Breve. The latter piece won a competition organized by the Real Academia de Bellas Artes de San Fernando in 1905, but would not be publicly performed for another 12 years. It was also around this time when Falla became attracted to his cousin. Okay, seriously. Can you all stop being so freaky? Falla was disappointed with La Vida Breve not being performed in Madrid, causing him to move to Paris. He earned a living by teaching piano, but would also tour in France, Belgium, Germany, and Switzerland. Shortly after arriving in Paris, Falla would meet many notable composers including Paul Dukas, Claude Debussy, Isaac Albéniz, and Enrique Granados. He would also establish a relationship with the members of Les Apaches. Thanks to the help of Albéniz, Falla was granted a scholarship by King Alfonso XIII, allowing him to continue living in Paris. He would write Cuatro Piezas Españolas in 1909, which was premiered by Les Apaches member Ricardo Viñes. The music scene in Paris had a profound impact on Falla, especially Debussy's Pelléas et Mélisande and Mussorgsky's Boris Godunov. He wrote Trois Mélodies in 1910 with text by Théophile Gautier. The piece premiered at the Société Musicale Indépendante. The winter of 1910 took a serious toll on Falla's health, causing him to become increasingly devoted to Catholicism. 2 years later, he would travel to Switzerland and Italy. While in Milan, he negotiated with publisher Casa Ricordi to publish the score of La Vida Breve, but the two couldn't reach an agreement. The score was eventually published by Max Eschig, who became Falla's publisher. Falla would meet Gregorio and Marina Martinez Sierra in 1914, collaborating on multiple works. He then decided to permanently settle in Paris, but was soon forced to move back to Madrid after the outbreak of World War I. During the time Falla had been in Paris, music criticism in Madrid had developed into numerous specialized publications. Disputes between them became frequent, sometimes motivated by politics. La Vida Breve was successfully premiered in Spain in late 1914 at the Teatro de la Zarzuela conducted by Pablo Luna. A year later, he was the pianist for the premiere of his Siete canciones populares españolas, with soprano Luisa Vela as the soloist. Other pieces written around this time include Oración de las Madres que tienen a sus hijos en brazos and Noches en los jardines de España. Falla was publicly opposed to Spain's neutrality during World War I. He criticized the German sinking of a British passenger ferry that Granados and his wife were on. He would also write articles denouncing the, quote, pernicious influence of the German tradition on European music. Add another one to the list, boys. In 1915, Falla wrote his ballet El Amor Brujo, which premiered to mixed reviews. Some criticized his orchestration, even accusing him of a, quote, lack of Spanishness, while one review highlighted the piece as, quote, the new Spanish musical renaissance. Falla would travel throughout his native Andalusia, going to the cities of Granada, Ronda, Algeciras, as well as his hometown of Cádiz. He then began working on another ballet, which would eventually become El Sombrero de Tres Picos. It was premiered at the Alhambra Theatre in London by the Ballet Russe. Falla wrote more operas and zarzuelas, but many of them were not performed due to his strictness on his compositions, according to Martinez Sierra. He rejected a proposal by the Ballet Russe director Sergei Diaghilev. The relationship between Falla and the Martinez Sierra couple began to deteriorate despite their daily correspondence, especially after the couple commissioned another composer to write incidental music for their Don Juan de España. Falla would travel back to Granada in 1919 with his sister, where he eventually settled. He became acquainted with many artists in the city, including Manuel Ángeles Ortiz, Hermenegildo Lanz, and especially Federico Garcia Lorca. Some pieces written around this time include Fantasía, bética, and Fanfare pour une fête. Falla became more interested in Andalusia, traveling to Seville during its Holy Week to perform. In addition, the concert version of his El Retablo de Maese Pablo was premiered in the city, while the stage version was premiered in Paris 2 months after. He then met composer Ernesto Halffter in Madrid, who became his most well-known student. Falla would become a member of the Hispanic Society of America in New York, and an academician of the Real Academia de Bellas Artes de Granada in 1924. 2 years later, he participated in a tribute to artist Luis Baccaria, with performances in Amsterdam and Zurich. On his 50th birthday, Falla received multiple titles and awards. This includes the titles of Adoptive Son of the cities of Seville and Guadix, the title of Favorite Son of his native Cádiz, and the Légion d'honneur. Falla wrote his harpsichord concerto in 1926 for Polish harpsichordist Wanda Landowska. 4 years later, he met Italian composer Alfredo Casella. Casella was a strong defender of Spanish music, and was upset about Falla's lack of recognition. Casella would record the harpsichord concerto in Paris, as well as some of Falla's songs, with Monia Barrientos as the soloist. In 1930, 2 groups of Spanish artists emerged, the Generación de 27 and the Grupo de los Ocho. Both of these groups were heavily inspired by Falla, and sought to combat conservatism in Spanish music. The Generation of 27 would even claim Falla was their, quote, spiritual leader. Both groups were dissolved after the Spanish Civil War. In 1931, the Second Spanish Republic was established following the deposition of King Alfonso XIII. Falla initially supported the Republic and was appointed as the first director of the Junta Nacional de Música. However, he would later write a letter to then-President Pedro Alcalá Zamora, urging him to take measures to stop the burning and looting of churches across the country. Falla's concern about the, quote, growing lack of morality in Spain led him to writing in his will that all of his works should be performed in accordance with Christian morality, and that his body should be buried in a sacred place. Interestingly, he initially supported the nationalist coup of 1936, seeing it as a way to stabilize the country. The coup would eventually lead to the Spanish Civil War, with Falla then shifting his support back to Republicans, defending his friends even at the risk of his own life. Falla made another appeal to President Manuel Falla, urging him to exercise his authority to protect Christians. This appeal was ultimately futile, as soon after his friend Garcia Lorca was assassinated in Granada. Falla would seclude himself in his home, only talking to his sister and a small circle of friends and neighbors. In a letter to writer José María Pamán, he would say that all of his problems stemmed from the burning of churches in Cádiz, which he called a, quote, collective blasphemy. Falla considered leaving Spain as Francisco Franco and the Nationalists came out victorious. He eventually moved to Argentina at the outbreak of World War II, arriving in Buenos Aires in late 1939. The Spanish government tried to get Falla to return to Spain, offering him a large pension and even awarding him the Orden Civil de Alfonso X el Sabio. Falla rejected the offer and stayed in Argentina, eventually moving to Cordoba. The war in Europe left him unable to collect royalties, having to be helped out by his Argentine friends and other Spanish exiles in Argentina. Falla began working on his cantata Atlántida, based on a poem of the same name, but had to stop work on it due to his poor health. He would also perform the works of Renaissance composer Tomás Luis de Victoria. The American film producer MGM proposed recording one of Falla's pieces with pianists José and Amparo Iturbi. Falla accepted the proposal, which helped improve his financial situation. He maintained friendships with many Argentine and Spanish artists, including composers Carlos Guastavino, Julián Bautista, and soprano Conchita Badia. Falla then moved to Altagracia, but his health continued to decline. He took multiple medications, measured his temperature several times a day, and developed a fear of drafts. Despite this, he began working on his biography with the help of musicologist Jaume Paisa. He was also appointed an academician of the Academia Nacional de Bellas Artes San Alejandro in Buenos Aires. Finally, on November 14, 1946, Manuel de Falla died of cardiac arrest. His funeral took place 5 days later at the Cathedral of Córdoba. About a month later, his body was transferred back to Spain with the help of his sister. With the express authorization of Pope Pius XII, Falla was buried at the Cádiz Cathedral next to Pamán. Atlántida was eventually finished by Halfter. While Falla was not a very prolific composer, American music critic Harold C. Schoenberg would say his music production had, quote, the craftsmanship of a jewel. His style involved a fusion of nationalism and impressionism, with Schoenberg arguing his style evolved from a more folklorist form of nationalism to a style inspired by the Spanish Golden Age. In a 2004 article by Tomás Fernández and Elena Tamaro, Falla's earlier works were based on flamenco music, as well as the rhythms, themes, and melodies of Andalusian and Castilian music. By 1914, Falla reached his mature period, with his style shifting more towards neoclassicism similar to Igor Stravinsky. Schoenberg would describe his harpsichord concerto as, quote, an expression of Hispanic neoclassicism, with deep roots in Spanish popular song and reminiscence to Italian composer Domenico Scarlatti. By the end of the 1920s, however, music scholars were somewhat divided on their interest in Falla's music. Factors contributing to this ranged from musical styles and fashion at the time to more political reasons. After his death, Falla was increasingly regarded as a nationalist composer. However, this perception would change over time, especially after the establishment of the Manuel de Falla archive in 1991. Falla's legacy has been quite firmly cemented in Spain, even during the Francoist regime. He is considered by some to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Spanish composer of all time. He's been featured on the 100 peseta note issued in 1970. He also has a theater in Cádiz, as well as a station of the Madrid Metro named after him. Schoenberg would say of him, quote, Falla was not only far superior to all the Spanish composers of his time, he was also the only Spanish composer who overcame the limits of mediocrity. Other interesting facts about Falla include his house in Granada now being a museum, and he never married.